The picture of all of them up there with the leaders from our church, and it was just incredible to see all of them up there. So it's really awesome. Really awesome. So tonight we're going to continue on in Exodus. We're going to be in Exodus chapters 25 and 26. Now, I'm not going to go back into what Pastor Mike was first teaching, but remember, or teaching right before this, but remember that it had to do with Israel affirming the covenant, and then Moses, along with Aaron, going back up on the hill, that frightful, crazy hill that had lightning and thundering and dark clouds. And that's where we are. Remember, as I spoke about quite a long time ago, and Pastor Mike reiterated, this being at the mountain is going to continue on all the way until we get into Leviticus. So we're kind of camped out at the bottom of the mountain right now, or on the top, depending on who you are. Chapter 25 covers basically three different things. The sanctuary, offerings for it, the Ark of the Testimony, and the table of the showbread. And it starts with God giving Moses instructions for the people to bring offerings for the building of the tabernacle. Remember, background, the people left Egypt, and it wasn't just that they left Egypt. God had prophesied that the people would be giving them a lot of stuff, and indeed they did. They were glad to see the children of Israel leave because of all the plagues. Here, take my gold, take this, take that, take this. Go, get out of here. It was only secondarily that Pharaoh changed his mind, but the people didn't want those silly Israelites in their land anymore because they caused nothing but problems for them. So they've been very enriched. So the first part we're going to talk about is these offerings. So I'll go ahead and read verses 1 through 25 of chapter 1 through 9 of chapter 25. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, that they bring me an offering. From everyone who gives it willingly with his heart, you shall take my offering. And this is the offering which you shall take from them: gold, silver, bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet thread, fine linen, and goat's hair, ram skins dyed red, badger skins, and acacia wood, oil for the light, and spices for the anointing oil, and for the sweet incense, onyx stones, and stones to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate. And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them, according to all I show you. That is the pattern of the tabernacle, and the pattern of all its furnishings. Just so you shall make it." So it's kind of an introduction. This first verse affirms that these instructions came from God, okay? They came directly from God. And he's speaking to Moses, okay? And notice what he says: bring me an offering. Bring me an offering. Now this is an offering, so that means it's a gift, okay? And it's from all those who willingly give it. These things that the people are instructed to give have really been given to them by God. I mean, a long time ago, God had said, "I'm going to do this." Yes, the Egyptians gave it to them, but it was God who caused it to happen. So they're just giving back to God freely out of their hearts. The New Testament backs up this idea of willingness to give to God. Turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 6 through 7. That's 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 6 through 7. And I'll pause for you to get there. I'm used to doing this in the senior study, except there I make people read out loud. I won't make you read out loud tonight. And in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 6 and 7, it says, "But this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully." What a promise that is. Verse 7, "So let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver." And that's really the way we, as New Testament believers, should be giving, is cheerfully. Not because we feel like, oh, I got to do it, I got to do it. There's so many religions out there that literally they will go around and say, okay, let me see your IRS statement. Okay, you haven't given enough this year, you need to give more. Okay? So this is not making people give. It's because God touches your heart, and then you give willingly back to God what He's actually given you. Okay, turning back to chapter 25 in Exodus. Verses 3 through 7. And here it lists what this offering that the people are going to give, what is needed, essentially. All these things listed here are things that are either needed to build the tabernacle, to furnish it, or to be used by the high priest in the ceremonies that are going to be conducted with the tabernacle. We're not going to see all of these things used tonight. We're going to see some of them. The first part of it up through verse 5, pretty much we will see all those things used. But the rest of them, it'll be later on. So keep it in the back of your mind where those things came from. And like I said, I've got a feeling most, if not all of this, came from the Egyptians. Because remember, when the Jews went to Israel, it was with very few people. And it was then later that they had all these goods, especially the gold and the precious stones. Okay, so those are the things there that are being used. And then verse 8, "And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them." So God says He's going to want them to build Him a sanctuary. Now the idea here is that it's going to be a holy place, a set-aside place. Commonly we refer to this as the Holy of Holies. We just sang the song and it talked about take me into the Holy of Holies. That's right into God's presence. Okay? Now, you have your handout there, and on the top picture of the first page, there's the picture of the tabernacle with the areas around it. Now, we're not going to cover all of this. Matter of fact, I don't know, some of you might have needed a magnifying glass, but I'm sorry, Owanda's not here tonight. You can't borrow hers. But it is kind of difficult to read. But if you will, we're going to cover some of these things tonight, but not everything. But if you look at the top left, just down, it says the Holy of Holies only held the Ark of the Covenant. And it's got an arrow pointing kind of to the left side of the tabernacle. That fenced off area is the area around the tabernacle, but the actual tabernacle is there to the left of the picture. So that is that portion of it is the Holy of Holies. Okay? And we also see in this verse that God wants to dwell amongst His chosen people, to be in their midst. Now, if you look at the handout again, the middle here, that middle picture, you'll notice something interesting. It's got the tabernacle there, and it's got the fence around the area. But do you see what's around it? Tents. That's because all the tribes of Israel were supposed to be camped around the tabernacle. So guess what? God was in their midst. He was right there in the middle of them. He camped out, if you will, in the middle of them. He wants to dwell here in the midst of his chosen people. And you can see that it'll be prescribed for the children of Israel later on as to how it's going to be set up. Certain tribes will be on certain areas, and they'll have certain jobs to do. But that'll be later on that we see that. Look at what 1 John chapter 4 has to say to us, though. In 1 John chapter 4, verse 15 and 16. 1 John chapter 4, verse 15 and 16. And here in 1 John chapter 4, verse 15 and 16, it says, "Whoever confesses that Jesus is the Son of God, God abides in him, and he in God. And we have known and believed that the love that God has for us. God is love, and he who abides in love abides in God, and God in him." In other words, as a believer, God's in our midst. He's within us. So much like the children of Israel had God abiding in the middle of them, we have God abiding in the middle of us. Isn't that awesome? That's a promise. It's incredible for us as believers. Going back to chapter 25, verse 9, it says, "According to all that I show you," that is the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, "just so you shall make it." Now, any woman here who's ever done sewing, I don't know, maybe there's a few guys that have sewed before, but if you've never made some particular item, you need a pattern, don't you? You need to know how you're going to make it. My wife used to have some dresses that she loved that she took to the Philippines, but guess what? Being there 15 and a half years, after a few years, those dresses start to wear out. She didn't have any pattern for that dress, and certainly we couldn't find that same kind of dress there, especially not in her size, and she's not exceptionally big. It's just that Filipinos are small. And so, what would she do? She had her old dress, and she could take it in as a pattern for them to make a new dress. She would buy whatever fabric it is that she wanted to make the dress out of, take the old dress, they'd take the dress apart and use the old dress as a pattern for making the new dress and sew it back up together. They needed a pattern. They couldn't just do it looking at it. And that's the same here for the tabernacle. They needed a pattern. They needed God to show them the directions on how to make it. And so that's what we will start to see as we move through the rest of 25 and 26. Okay, so we have the first real section about what's going to be made, and it's instructions for the Ark of the Testimony. No, not Raiders of the Lost Ark. Ark of the Testimony, okay? And this is going from verses 10 through 22, so let me go ahead and read that to you. "And they shall make an ark of acacia wood. 2.5 cubits shall be its length, 1.5 cubits its width, 1.5 cubits its height. And you shall overlay it with pure gold, inside and out you shall overlay it, and shall make on it a molding of gold all around. You shall cast 4 rings of gold for it, and put them in its 4 corners. 2 rings shall be on one side, and 2 rings on the other side. And you shall make poles of acacia wood, and overlay them with gold. You shall put the poles into the rings on the side of the ark, that the ark may be carried by them. The poles shall be in the rings of the ark. They shall not be taken from it. And you shall put into the ark the testimony which I will give you. You shall make a mercy seat of pure gold. 2.5 cubits shall be its length, and 1.5 cubits its width. And you shall make 2 cherubim of gold, of hammered work. You shall make them at the 2 ends of the mercy seat. Make 1 cherub at one end, and the other cherub at the other end. You shall make the cherubim at the 2 ends of one piece with the mercy seat. And the cherubim shall stretch out their wings above, covering the mercy seat with their wings, and they shall face one another. The faces of the cherubim shall be toward the mercy seat. You shall put the mercy seat on top of the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony that I give you. And there I will meet with you, and I will speak with you from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubim which are on the ark of the testimony, about everything which I will give you in commandment to the children of Israel. Okay, so first of all, this ark is going to be made out of a wood, an acacia wood. And now the Hebrew lexicon, it says it comes from a tree, a large tree growing in Egypt and Arabia, having the bark covered with black thorns, and it has blackish pods, and the wood is very hard. So it's a very hard wood. I think this might be one of the woods that a friend of mine who used to do flooring used to use, especially in some of the houses he used to do up in Ketchum, in that area, in Sun Valley. And it's a gorgeous wood, but it's a hardwood, which means hardly anything will soak into it. It's not like other woods where if you were going to do what they're going to be instructed to do, it's going to create a problem. So this is acacia wood, and that's one of the things that people were told to bring. And it was made 47 inches long by 27 inches wide, and the same height. Okay, so this isn't a massive thing. I mean, this is not that big. It's just big enough, okay? And it's going to be, what, in the next verse? Overlaid with pure gold inside and out. Now, this idea of overlaying here is not like gold foil. I know Neri's been to Thailand. We've been to Thailand, my wife and I. I don't know if anybody else has, but they have Buddhas everywhere. And they make the Buddhas either out of wood or something else, but then people spend their money and get gold leaf, and they walk up to the Buddha and rub the gold leaf off on the Buddha. So some of these Buddhas, you see, they have some gold leaf in certain areas, and other areas it's missing. That's not what this is describing. This is like it's gold plating. It's going to be a thick gold that's put on this wood, okay? And not only that, but it has a molding around it. How about it? Would you like molding around your chest of drawers or on your walls and it's made of gold? Oh, that would be rather expensive to do. I don't even recall seeing rich houses have that. So, that would be expensive. Now look at verse 12. Next you shall cast 4 rings of gold for it, and put them in its 4 corners. 2 rings shall be on one side and 2 rings on the other side. Okay, so they were to cast gold. That means you're going to pour gold into a mold, and you're going to make 4 rings out of pure gold. Now that's not normal in our day and age. Typically we don't do pure gold because it's soft and it can cause problems. But this is supposed to be pure gold. And they're rings, and they're going to be fastened on the sides of this. And then the next verse we see why. You shall make poles of acacia wood, overlay them with gold. It's starting to become clear again. Again, poles out of acacia wood and overlaid with gold. And you shall put the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark, that the ark may be carried by them. So this is what they're instructed to do. They're instructed to put these poles in the rings, and that's the way it's supposed to be carried. And we'll find out later on that it was forbidden to touch the ark at all. So that's why the poles would remain in the rings until it's time to pick it up and move on. Because obviously they're going to be wandering in the desert. They're going to be wandering through the promised land. Nothing is going to be settled until they get to Jerusalem and the temple is built. So they'll have to pick it up. And if they touch it, well, we have an example of that. Turn to 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 6 and 7. 2 Samuel 6, 6 and 7. And we see what happened to a poor guy named Uzzah. 2 Samuel chapter 6, verses 6 and 7. And they had had the ark, and they'd moved it around from place to place, but there's something significant here. When they came to Nachar's threshing floor, Uzzah put out his hand to the ark of God, took a hold of it, for the oxen stumbled. You go, wait a second. Why were there oxen involved? I thought this was supposed to be carried by poles. Well, they had put the ark on a cart, probably to make it easier to move around, instead of the guys carrying it. And they'd put it on a cart, maybe even thinking it'd be easier. Well, guess what? Verse 7, then the anger of the Lord was aroused against Uzzah, and God struck him there for his error, and he died there by the ark of God. That would be enough to unsettle you, wouldn't it? It unsettled David for a while, but they didn't do what was prescribed, and that was leave the gold poles in and move it using the gold poles. And that's where the problem came in. Okay, going back to Exodus chapter 25, verse 16. And you shall put into the ark the testimony which I will give you. So that's future tense. What is this testimony? It's the 10 Commandments, the tablets of stone, the testimony of how they were supposed to act. They hadn't received it yet, but he's preparing them for that by saying, you're going to put that into this ark. When I give it to you, you put it in there. So it'll always be present with you. Verse 17. You shall make a mercy seat of pure gold. 2.5 cubits shall be its length, and 1.5 cubits its width. Okay, so we see this is the same dimensions as the box, if you will, itself. 47 inches by 27 inches wide. It doesn't tell us how thick it is going to be, but I'd have to guess that for a cover that size to have the cherubim on it and the weight, it'd have to be a fairly thick amount of gold. So you can imagine this is pretty heavy stuff. It's not lightweight stuff that we're playing with here. Okay? So they make this lid, and in the future instructions, this mercy seat will become very important, which we'll see part of that when we get to Leviticus. So hold on. Can you hold on that long? If you want to cheat, go look at Leviticus 16. Verses 18 through 20. And you shall make 2 cherubim of gold, of hammered work you shall make them, at the 2 ends of the mercy seat. Make one cherub at one end, and the other cherub at the other end. You shall make the cherubim at the 2 ends of it of one piece with the mercy seat. And the cherubim shall stretch out their wings above, covering the mercy seat with their wings. And they shall face one another. The faces of the cherubim shall be towards the mercy seat. So these verses describe the cherubim. Now, when it says cherubim, cherub, don't get confused. Cherubim is the plural of cherub. And also don't get confused and get in your mind that these are the cherubs that you've seen in cartoons and pictures, and they're the fat little, almost look like an oversized baby that's so cute. if you see things in other places like Ezekiel, you're not going to think that they're cute little baby-looking angels anymore. They're like fierce. So that's not what these cherubs are, okay? And they're going to be out of what? Hammered gold. And the way it reads, it sounds like somehow they're going to take some of the gold and possibly hammer it out from the mercy seat and make these cherub. Whew. Or maybe it's even something else. I don't know, but it sounds like it's all one piece by the description. That's a lot of work. Must have been some incredible craftsmen who did this, huh? Let's hold our thoughts about the mercy seat for a little bit, and we're going to look at the next verse too. Verse 21, you shall put the mercy seat on top of the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony that I give you. Okay, so this mercy seat was supposed to be like a lid on the ark. And again, he tells them, put the testimony in the ark. Kind of as a reminder, you know, don't lose track of what you're supposed to be doing, i.e. the Ten Commandments. Keep it there. Keep it close. Okay? So what does this whole ark look like? Well, you can pick up your papers again and look at the second page at the top of it. And you will see a picture. Somebody's drawing, obviously. We don't know exactly what it looked like, but there are other people that think they know what it looks like. But there's a representation. And if you notice, it's got the poles, it's got the rings, it's got the cherubim, and they're facing toward each other, but they're not looking at each other. They're looking down at the mercy seat. Okay? They're looking down at the mercy seat. Can you imagine how brilliant this would look? Oh my goodness. I mean, all this gold and the shininess of it, it would have been unbelievable. Okay? Not only that, but it's a permanent reminder to them as they travel throughout the wilderness and even in the promised land that God's presence is there, because that's where he would be. How do we know that? Well, look at what it says next. Verse 22, and there I will meet with you, and I will speak with you from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubim which are on the ark of the testimony, about everything which I will give you in commandment to the children of Israel. So now he's turned his attention from giving Moses something to say to the children of Israel about instructions. He's talking to Moses directly here. And he's saying he'll meet Moses there at the mercy seat. And he'll speak to him from above it, from between the cherubim. He's going to be intimate, if you will, in his conversations with Moses. Now, we've seen already up until now, God's spoken to Moses so many different ways, so many different times. The burning bush, just talking to him, period, and giving him the instructions about what to do with Pharaoh. He talked to him. He's talked to him up on the hill. But this is going to be a reminder that, hey, I'll talk to you. No matter where we go, I will be with you to continue to speak to and through you, to the children of Israel. As believers, we can have comfort in knowing that God is with us even. And he'll speak to us. And if we're obedient to him and what he's called us to do, he will speak through us to other people. I've had some great opportunities ever since we've moved up here. Before we were even moving here, obviously, in the Philippines, there were awesome opportunities to speak about God to people. But even here, I've had so many opportunities. And if you just remain open to how he wants to use you and use you to speak to other people, he will. We had an awesome opportunity again this month, yesterday afternoon, to go over to Countryside and to be able to minister to the people that are there in Countryside. They can't get out. That's where they're stuck. And it's wonderful that we've gotten in there. And Daryl had even told us, well, this month we might even not have to wear masks. Because last month they got rid of the temperature check and writing your name down and all that stuff. And this month, no more masks. It was absolutely wonderful.
Nice.
And Daryl brought the message from John. We've just been going through it, kind of talking about it, and ministered to these people. And it was absolutely awesome, the opportunity we have. You're welcome. Anybody, whoever wants to go, you can come with us. Second Tuesday of the month. So God can use us if we're obedient to listen to Him and to do what He's called us to do, just like God would be with Moses. Now we go to the second section here in this chapter, and that's verses 23 through 30, and we're going to read all about the table for the showbread. The table for the showbread. Okay, verse 23. You shall also make a table of acacia wood. 2 cubits shall be its length, a cubit its width, and a cubit and a half its height. And you shall overlay it with pure gold, and make a molding of gold all around. You shall make for it a frame of a handbreadth all around, and you shall make a gold molding for the frame all around. And you shall make for it 4 rings of gold, and put the rings on the 4 corners that are at its 4 legs. The rings shall be close to the frame, as holders for the poles to bear the table. And you shall make the poles of acacia wood, overlay them with gold, that the table may be carried with them. You shall make its dishes, its pans, its pitchers, and its bowls for pouring. You shall make them of pure gold, and you shall set the showbread on the table before me always. Now we have another piece of furniture, if you will, for the tabernacle. This, again, is made from acacia wood. The measurements, it's a little bit smaller. It's 26 inches long by 18 inches wide by 27 inches high. So again, this isn't a really big piece of furniture. You can look at it again on the bottom of your second page of the handout. And it has legs on it. Now, it says it's going to have legs, but it doesn't tell us much about those legs. Obviously, everything else has been coated with gold. It's going to be coated with gold too. And sitting on it is some incense and some showbread. Okay? It also has, guess what? The gold molding around it, just like the other one. A frame that is a hand's breadth. So about the width of a hand. Most of us have about the same size of hand. If one of my friends, Jonas Jackson, was here, his would be about twice as wide. So let's just figure most of us have close to the same hand width, about 3 inches, 4 inches, something like that. Okay? And all these things are very similar to the way the ark was made. Okay? It's all covered with gold, gold rings, poles with gold. Everything has to be gold. And not only that, but if you notice again, it's pure gold, no impurities. These things are going to be in God's presence. So it needs to be pure, because God is pure. And it can't be something that's filled with impurities. Okay, verse 29. You shall make its dishes, its pans, its pitchers, and its bowls for pouring. You shall make them of pure gold. These are implements that are going to be used in the ceremony. Dishes, pans, pitchers, bowls. Later on, again, you'll see the purpose for these things as it talks about the tabernacle and the things that go through it. We're going to be talking about the tabernacle way to the end of Exodus, in the chapter 30s. It's going to